Well, good day, good day, good day. It's amazing to be here this morning. We are at the incredible, frankly, Gibson showroom with all these incredible guitars on the wall that you can literally just pick off and play. And I'm here with JC, the CEO of Gibson Guitars. I hope you don't mind me calling you JC. We are going to talk about everything to do with Gibson Guitars, the history, and technology. We're here at South by Southwest in Austin, where we've had the Interactive Festival all about tech. And now we're into the music and movies section, and I feel like we're going to get into maybe converging those two at some point this morning. But why don't we start by you telling everybody a little bit about the history, the long, illustrious history of Gibson Guitars.
Okay, the whole timeline. Well, back in 1894, well, it was 1894 when Orville Gibson was crafting his first fretted instruments as we now know them, and he was truly a craftsman who loved to create and shape and find ways to deliver sound through his instruments. And then fast forward 125 years later, and here we are. And it's amazing when you look back at the storied history and the legacy of Gibson, it's always been synonymous with it shaping and creating and delivering and, quite frankly, owning the share of sound through every generation, every genre, every gender over the last 125 years. And it's amazing. Certainly there are periods that are highly memorable for their innovation and then what they delivered in that period in the 50s when the shape started coming and the innovation of sound and names like Les Paul, who weren't just an artist signing a guitar, he was an innovator into himself. And so that era was such a magnificent era where it was truly the positive collision of creators and makers coming together to create what we know now to be some of the best guitars ever produced. But our challenge is, if we've been creating and owning and shaping sound for 125 years, how do we set even better conditions for the next 125 years? And that's what we're here to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we do at Grit Daily, which is probably a little bit different to a lot of the other tech news publications, is we include, entertainment and lifestyle news in there as well, because we see that it's all coming together. But one of the things that I've noticed personally is that where I and you and many other people spend a lot of our time just playing and creating and figuring out what was working in music, back in the day, we now are in this situation where the educational establishments, we've been defunding the arts, defunding music and dance and painting and everything that's subjective, because we want schools to be on these league tables. And so it's difficult for kids these days. Probably the highest paid guitar tutor in the world right now is YouTube. Right?
True.
How are we going to change things around? How are we going to get kids to get back into being creative and learning how to play guitars? Because it seems like, to me, there's a lot of consumption right now and not a lot of production.
Yeah, I think we are going through that sort of stage where because of the access and the convenience to content, and quite frankly, those platforms are amazing. The ability to share memorable moments or experiences in an instant, I think, is absolutely awesome for what it can do to bring people together when they can't physically be together. At the same time, I think we're seeing, and you're seeing signs of it, but I think the pivot will happen when the consumers of content want to become the creators of content. And we're seeing it now that people, through better tools, can actually be creators. I think one of the challenges is that if you think about back in the day, and let's be those guys for a second, there were usually like dates with destiny. If you were going to create an album or a movie or a song or go play live, you had to, you put a date there and you're like, okay, we're doing this in this stage. And I think we've now got to the stage where there are no dates with destiny because it's a constant flow of content. And as a result, people don't sort of maybe take the time to learn about how to be a creator, to invest in their time to actually create their own content. And then when you see people that do that, they actually get more of an experience through being a creator than a consumer of content. And I know that sounds like a big 180-degree pivot that needs to happen, but I see it in my personal life where my kids would rather be the creators than the consumers of content. And then when they put it out there and they see that people like it, and then they have some ideas, and also there's some criticism out there that comes back, and if you're constructive in how you receive your criticism, it can actually help you to be a better creator. So I think that's the virtuous cycle that needs to get started.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, when I think about the problem that we have and trying to get people into playing guitars again and creating music and just producing their own content. And let's be fair, like it's 2019.
Yep.
If you want to stand out in 2019, you have to be original. You have to be producing your own content. Creativity is actually everything right now. So it's still very odd to me that we defund the arts because that doesn't help people be creative. I mean, how do we solve that? Is there anything we can do? Yeah,
I think it is being done. I in my former life as the president of Levi's, and I also did a startup with Keen Footwear, and I think a lot of companies, and not through just the trying to do the right thing as a corporate leader, but I think companies have certainly filled a lot of that void by bringing in young talent and creative talent and accessing that and giving them opportunities to do what they do best. And we have very real examples here in the showroom where we've got some young people, on the peak of South by Southwest. They get to show up here and actually engage in the industry, and there's no education, there's no course here. They're learning live, and all of a sudden they're meeting an artist and they're doing something that they didn't know they were going to do that day. And then when they did, they go, oh my God, look what I did today. I got to go out to Willie Nelson's ranch and set things up and see people, and I got to see Willie Nelson. And that wasn't a course in school, going to Luck Ranch. That was a course in life. And I think if we are going to try to rely on funding of education and arts, I think hope is the strategy. Let's hope it happens. Or we rely on real life experiences through brands and companies and people who can mentor other people to say, this is what your life could look like if you engage. And I think that's the most important word we can sort of put into the zeitgeist of this generation is engage, lean into it, ask questions. You're not expected to have all the answers, but you should be expected to ask great questions.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of what Gibson do, you've got some absolutely incredible, musical instruments. You've got a number of different imprints, brands, that all fall under Gibson. But obviously that means that somebody's got to pick up a guitar and play it.
Sure.
And we have to teach them, somehow. But technology and musical instruments has been coming together for a long time. Obviously, we don't have to worry too much about keyboards. There are keyboards with light-up keys which show you where to press, and then you get used to it. Guitars are a different, thing altogether. How can we converge technology with something that is effectively analog to help people really understand how to play it and get the most of it?
Yeah, I think it's happening. It's already happening, and to some in the guitar world, this might be a controversial statement from the Gibson guy, but pre-Gibson, I'll tell you what did more to engage. If you say, how can we get people engaged in a fun way, learning without making it too educational and making it a challenge and having fun, guess what Guitar Hero did? Guitar Hero introduced more people to how to actually be in the band in a simple starting point, create music, and all of a sudden, that was an era where the guitar world said, how do we harness the power of people now not playing just a video game, but actually making sound in their own way? So there's things like that. I know there's a lot of apps out there that are learning apps that are encouraging people to play. And let's face it, I think people learn differently. Some learn by ear, and they can pick a guitar up. Some have to learn through, as you said, YouTube and video. Others need an instructor. I think the most important thing that I've learned in watching a lot of people try to play is the first question you should ask is, what's your favorite song that you want to learn? And if you go there, someone starts playing the song they love, they're into it immediately. If you go and watch that moment, which everyone has that in their memory of the piano teacher saying, learn this song that you've never heard, you don't like, and no one likes it, quite frankly, but that's what you have to learn, the experience in minute one is bad. Say, here's an amazing song. And my daughter, she loves Adele. She starts playing Adele, and all of a sudden, she's playing it now. So I think setting those conditions for success, love the song, lean into it in a way that your learning style can actually take on whatever is available to you, and all of a sudden, you're playing guitar. And I've seen people learn a guitar in an hour, and I've seen some people frustrated for years, and then somewhere in the middle is probably the three-chord truth.
Yeah, I mean, I resonate with that. My dad was in a band, a rock band.
Sure.
Actually, rockabilly. He had the whole long velvet suit and everything. Nobody could touch him because that velvet stuff is
exactly.
creepy. But you know, the first song I ever learned was Ghost Riders in the Sky because I was given a deadline. I had to stand on stage in front of the whole school and play that. And it makes you just like want to get it down and get it done.
Yeah.
Like, we are seeing, like with technology, we're seeing all sorts of things like auto-tuning guitars. I saw a really cool little box that you can fit on the back of your guitar recently, and it's a speaker. And when you punch in on the app what song you want to play, it changes the sound of the guitar to match what the song sounds like. And there's all sorts of really cool things. But I've also been having discussions with people like the Ting Tings, for example, who recently had a new album out, and that's very traditional, but mixed with like drum and bass beats and other things. And then back in February last year, you had an entire album produced by artificial intelligence from Skiggy, and that's where I think it's interesting for us to sort of get into, where is artificial intelligence going to take us? Because it's already replacing lots of jobs in various parts of life. Are we looking at a future where actually most of the pop records that come out are going to be written by, produced by, performed by artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. I mean, this whole AI world, it's I think it's exciting to be on the pioneering sort of start of it. Where it goes, I don't think anyone has that answer. What I do think is that there's an amazing book out by a guy named Howard Gardner. It's called The 5 Minds of the Future. And one of those minds, what he's saying is that the way that we have to shape minds of the future is not what was required 100 years ago through the education system that we now know. And one of the minds of the future is the synthesizing mind, and how in a world where there's so much information and so much content, it was inevitable that the synthesizing mind was going to have to take it, synthesize it, and then take some action on the information. And to me, that's really what AI is. It's taking all of this information and all of this insight and this content that's out there and synthesizing it and directing it towards something. Is it music? Is it actually in the medical field? Is it in the entertainment field? I don't ever see that AI is replacing, and I think there's one word that on the other A, if there's artificial intelligence, and I'm going to make this up live because I think it actually, then there's authentic insight. That's the other AI. And I think today those two coexist and should coexist really well. I think we're in a generational dynamic where people are longing for authentic experiences. Authenticity is delivered through a crafted instrument, authenticity in food, authenticity in entertainment. I mean, the live performance has never been more in demand, so that authentic insight with artificial intelligence to actually not be the leading force of it, but be a supportive force of it, I think that's where it goes directionally.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. I like that, by the way. I might start using that AI.
It's not bad.
I'll send you $5 by PayPal every time I use it. One of the things I think is really interesting is the dynamic of bands and individual performance has changed as well, and technology is leading that charge. The likes of the Ting Tings and Sleigh Bells and Royal Blood make way much more noise on stage with two people than you'd ever think of before. And of course, you've got people like Elderbrook and Ed Sheeran and others, and they're basically doing everything by themselves. Playing keyboards, guitars, drums, all simultaneously. Technology has enabled that. Like, is it now the era of the individual star or the duo? Are we going to see bands really coming to the fore with lots of members again, or? Well,
I think, and again, history shows that there's a very real distinction between enduring innovation that moves things forward and makes almost a permanent step change in how you think about things. And then there's those novelty moments, that just happen and all of a sudden, boom. And so, it's really interesting now when you see this. We've never been in an era where there's a wider spectrum of choice of music, from authentic, crafted music right through to, EDM, right through to all the things that you're talking about. But at the end of the day, with that wide spectrum of choice and genre of music, you also have a wide spectrum of access to music, and then you have a wide spectrum of fans of music. And I think the wisdom of the crowd typically will determine where things go over time. And we're seeing that now. And the wisdom of the crowd loves live experiences, witness the festival resurgence. And, when you look back at time, you were mentioning, this looping dynamic and this sort of self-contained creation. Google Les Paul and the pulverizer, he invented that in the 50s. He was one of the first guys. He attached it to his guitar, and he was doing multi-track looping. And then all of a sudden, call it 60 years later, people think that's a new innovation when in fact it was invented. Or, imagine a 16-year-old going to Coachella for the first time and going, oh my God, I've got freedom and creativity at my fingertips and all the bands I love, and I'm with my tribe. Well, 50 years ago, that tribe was called Woodstock. So I think there's these enduring dynamics of tribes and sounds and that all come together, and sometimes they're individuals and sometimes there's artists that are, called the band. But I think it's all in pursuit of a sound that they're trying to deliver, and the ultimate test of that sound is, do the artists love what they're doing, and do more people like and appreciate as fans what they're doing? And if you get that combination right, it's pretty magical.
I mean, ultimately, to create all of this incredible music that we love and that changes our emotions and that really connects with us, we have to start with instruments at some point. Even if you're playing keyboards, most of that is sampled, right now. But I think one of your latest products is actually an acoustic guitar, right?
Mm-hmm. It is.
When we get back to actually creating this stuff, we've got to be inspired by the instruments we play. So, what are some of the most exciting things that you've seen in terms of, new instruments and new directions and, bringing technology and acoustic together?
Well, we're very, very fortunate, and not just fortunate because we actually worked hard to get there, but we have some inherent balances in our business for our brands that actually are in our favor. So we have, I think it's fair to say, we have the most authentic, aspirational, iconic brand Gibson, but we also have the most accessible, authentic, iconic brand Epiphone, much more affordable, and we're also very balanced in our electrics and our acoustics and other fretted instruments. So when you start with that balance point of aspiration and access, and then also the widest spectrum of choice across electrics, and then all the shapes and sounds across all of our electrics, from the Les Paul, the SG, all those hollow body, the 335, the Explorers, the Firebirds, and then you get over to the acoustic side with obviously the workhorse, the J45, but that J200 and the Hummingbird. They're just synonymous with moments in time that really mattered for artists. And so our challenge is, how do we continue sort of to create instruments that are still aspirational but also accessible? So one of the things we worked on this year was trying to get an acoustic guitar made in our Bozeman factory. Our acoustic guitars, they're crafted in the USA. They're made with amazing materials, and we take real pride in that. But they also come at a price tag with that. And we said, what would it take to get a $1,000 Gibson acoustic guitar? A real challenge for the team, but they delivered against it, and we launched it a couple of months ago at the NAMM show, and we'll be delivering that in the next few months. And now that sort of aspiration of Gibson can get into more people's hands through just looking at it a little bit differently. And so we're super excited about that, and we've got a lot of actually new guitars getting ready to hit the market in about a month. And what we did was we just listened, and people said, when you call something a classic, go back and in that 50s and 60s, be true to the spec, and if it's a classic, get the colorway, get everything right about it. So we just did that. And people were like, thank you, Gibson, for just sticking to classics. And at the same time, we're able to lean a little bit into innovation with our contemporary range, where people said, man, you're putting too much on the guitar, but we like this, we like this, we like this. So we stripped away some of what was considered to be novelty and went in true innovation that would help create and shape sound. And in the last 6 months, we've put more into our guitars than we probably have done in the last 10 years in terms of listening to what musicians want. And sometimes they don't know what they want, but when you give it to them, they start to love it.
Yeah, that's interesting because, I see this in startups all the time. I don't think we can call you a startup anymore, but been around maybe a bit too long. But there's this tipping point where you're doing something because you can and you're able to.
Yeah.
And then you tip over to you produce what people tell you to produce because you get that customer feedback.
Right.
And I feel like you're there, but at the same time, we live in an era where everybody wants everything to be customized just their way, so it's just for them. Like we've got like Nike ID trainers and all sorts of other options available to us to just tell everybody what we want, and they have to give us one product that's fit for us. I mean, where is that going in the world of instruments?
Well, I think it goes to, and I think I'm pretty sure it was Steve Jobs that said, don't give them what they want. Give them what they didn't know they needed, and when they get it, they can't live without it. And I just think that's just an amazing way to think about it. And I think he and Apple are proof of that. Most of the products that they've delivered, no one imagined it and said, I need to do this, this, and this. He just said, let's figure it out for people. But when it comes to guitars or customization, I was at Levi's for many years, and clearly clothing is a very personalized, customized dynamic. But I will tell you that when you see people and you see that jacket or you see that guitar, there are very few individuals that can truly determine exactly what they want. The creative process actually stifles some people. And I've seen it happen when you walk into a Levi's store and say, hey, let's do a cool jean jacket for you. What do you want on it? And they're like, well, I'm not sure. And then you start with just saying, well, how about we can put your initials on it? Okay, that's cool. We got a few pins we can put on. Like, okay. And I think enabling and setting the conditions for that creative process to happen for everybody, not just for those cool people that know exactly what they want, we can do that. But I think it's reimagining how to democratize customization so that, and there are brands that have done that. And again, people might not like this reference, but I think one of the at-scale masters of customization on a daily basis, within 2 blocks of where you live or where you work, you get change from $5. They teach you a new language, Vente. They give you 18,000 permutations and combinations, and on the 3rd day they learn your name, and it's called Starbucks. Yeah. So if they can do that at scale, how can we start thinking about what we can do at scale? And what's amazing with guitars is as people can customize them, their own strings, their string choice. Once they learn about strings and tone, they can have a pick choice, they can have a strap choice, they can have sound choice. So people, by virtue of the guitars that already exist, can customize their sound with all of the available tools, so to speak. But I think the notion of bringing customization starts with sort of making sure that the creative process is simple to understand, and then the sky's the limit.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, Guitar Hero was kind of a little bit responsible for that as well, because every single thing within that game you could choose. Granted, they gave you choices,
sure,
and you had to mix and match, but it gave people the idea that you could maybe just actually do this in real life. Gibson's been around a long time. Mm-hmm. I've seen lots of companies that have fallen by the wayside over the years. The Fortune 500 from back then is completely indistinguishable from where we are now. But you still have brands that are very traditional, like John Lewis, the retailer, 150 years old, and they have become the forefront of e-commerce. They really they reinvented themselves from the ground up, and they're really leading the charge in that sense. In terms of that, what is Gibson going to do next? What's in the future for you, and how do you stay relevant in the 21st century? It's very different to the past.
It's a great question, and so I can draw on a lot of different experience that I've had, but also, and I'll take you to just a few years ago at Levi's. Call it in 2010. 2012, I joined Levi's at a moment when fast fashion was coming, when athleisure, that was coming at it, and all of a sudden, Levi's found itself in sort of that mediocre middle ground of a commoditized denim brand, and yet it invented the blue jean. Right. And so we, as a team, we just reasserted that authenticity, and the center point was authenticity, and we said, let's rebuild Fort Levi's by being more aspirational, more accessible, at the same time. How do you leverage your iconic status and lean into innovation? And we did some amazing things. We partnered with Cone Mills Denim, literally the first partner that Levi's had to create denim, and said, let's do a Levi's vintage clothing range. And at the same time, we're having conversations literally with Google to say, what's the first wearable technology solution that you could come up with between Google and Levi's? And literally, in fact, 2 years ago, 2 years ago, here at South by Southwest, we had two houses at Levi's. One was the launch of the Project Jacquard, the Google Levi's, so that's leaning into the innovative future. And the house next door was literally celebrating the 50th anniversary of Rolling Stone magazine and the invention of the jean jacket, the trucker jacket. So we had those opposing forces of iconic and innovation happening, and the common denominator was authenticity. And I think taking that sort of same notion to Gibson, we have earned authenticity over time. I think we can consider Gibson to be an iconic brand, but at the same time, we can't just rest on what happened 50, 60 years ago, and I think that's the challenge. And there's a lot of interest in used guitars, and people, if you're responsible for leading a company forward, and everyone says, well, the best days are behind you, how do you pivot that to put a stronger lens on the future? And I think you do it three ways. The first is you're true to your past. And we were not always true to our past. We are now. We went back and painstakingly looked at the guitars we have and how to make sure that when we call something a classic from that era, it truly represents its past. The second is, and this is maybe not the coolest part, but understand there's modernization of manufacturing still with craftsmanship. So really updating the quality expectation and making sure that as a made in the USA Gibson brand, you're actually taking advantage of authenticity through craftsmanship, but also modernization and getting that balance right. And then the third one is, how do you then lean into the future with innovation that actually is helping to create, shape, and deliver sound? And how do you not just, and I use that with the team now to say, let's look at not just share of guitar market, let's look at the share of sound. And how can we be leaders in shaping and creating and delivering sound? And if you think about a guitar, it does have strings, it has picks, it has pickups, it has straps, it has amps. How do we look at share of sound that way, so we're actually really protecting the core of what we are famous for, but expanding for more in terms of the pursuit of sound? And I think leveraging the iconic past, learning about what the capabilities are today, gives you the ability to be future focused.
And as we head off into what is going to be something like 6 billion smartphones on the planet by 2020, almost one smartphone per person.
Yeah.
Obviously, apps have changed our entire lives, and they've been changing the music industry recently. I mean, we already talked about that strap-on speaker that can change the sound of your guitar, but how is the smartphone and the guitar, which is still quite an analog device, going to change things for everyone? And how can people leverage their smartphone to maybe just like pop up anywhere and produce and create incredible music for anyone, anytime?
Well, I think I certainly see, and I travel a ton, and we're all connected to our devices, but I'm seeing more people using it for less novelty. And more about, take the app Audible. It's a book app. It's easy, but so you can read a book by listening to it through your smartphone. I see people reading the news, everything. So I think where it goes is if we think that, you consume things in little bites, which people do, I think the new luxury is not going to be just about the experience, which we often reference. I think a new luxury is time. And if you said to someone, I've done this before. In fact, yesterday I was speaking at a South by Southwest, and I said, who here wants to learn to play the guitar? Everyone's hand goes up. And then you start saying, well, why don't you? Why don't you? Oh, I don't have time. I'm not very good at it. I tried it. And chances are they tried it at a point when they were learning a song that they didn't like, went on an instrument that maybe wasn't comfortable or good enough for them, and they didn't have enough time. But if you said to someone, hey, you're going to have time, here's an amazing instrument that it's with you for life, and play a song that you love, all of a sudden you're in a whole different mindset. And I think it's whether it's smartphone driven, I see a lot of people, there's great guitar tabs. You can just go on there, hit it, auto scroll, and it brings your song up and you can learn it and play it. I use that all the time. And it's just amazing where you can actually take 10 minutes, and once you get to a certain level, in 10 minutes you can learn a song. And what I would encourage people to do, which I had to learn kind of the hard way, is don't just play the first 4 bars of a song and say, I've got this. It's amazing how many people know the beginnings of songs and they don't know all the words. And I would encourage anyone to say, take a song, learn it, all the way through, and you'll have it for life. And then do another one, and you'll find a few months later, you've got 10 songs that are with you for the rest of your life. And whether that's enabled through a smartphone or whether it's enabled through an experience with friends, the common denominator is you become the creator.
And we've changed the rules of the music industry. You know, if you get to the point where you actually want to go and put this out there and get people to listen to it, you know, in the old days, you used to go on tour to sell the album.
Absolutely.
Now you effectively give the album away so that you can sell tickets for the tour. And, you know, a big part of that is, you know, the SoundClouds of this world and everything else, which of course are also technology-driven, smartphone-driven. Like, what does the future look like for actually getting this music into people's hands and you know, let them listen to your creations? Yeah,
I think it's, well, it is amazing. I mean, we truly, through digitization, have democratized access, production, and quite frankly, the way that people can listen to things. I think the challenge going forward is going to be, there's overwhelming content. And how do you, I think the question we should ask ourselves is, who truly influences your future sound? Who do you want to listen to? And you talk about AI, I mean, it's amazing when, whether it's on Spotify or Apple Music or any of those music platforms, they're constantly learning what you like and delivering what you like and peppering in new songs that you might like. And I would think they're more of a force of influence than people recognize. And if you ask the average person, where do you find out about new music? The answer is a wide spectrum, right? Oh, some friends, I learn about it here, I learn about it here. And I think the where it goes is, how do you understand the influencers of who actually is going to take you to the place you're not sure where it is, but when you get there, you love it, you know? And there's that famous scene in Alice in Wonderland, you know, where she shows up in that house and it's got all those doors and the Mad Hatter's there, and she's like, oh, which door should I take? And he says, where do you want to go? And she says, well, I don't know. And he says, well, then any door will take you there. And I think that's sort of the conundrum we're in today, is there's so much music and so much choice and so much content. How do you then distill that and synthesize it down to music that you know and love already, but you're also influenced to discover new music? And however that gets simplified, I think so goes the ability to put new music out there.
Fantastic. Listen, I wish we could talk all day about this, but unfortunately we can't. All these things always have a time limit.
Sure.
It's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, JC, for spending time with us today. You know, and I've been Stewart Rogers, a managing editor for Grit Daily. This has been JC, CEO of Gibson Guitars, and thank you all for watching.
Cool. Thanks. Good.